Welcome to the bold analysis. I'm so glad that I'm doing this podcast back home. As you knew, we actually traveled back home in Siaya, and we gave Sarah Tieno a decent send-off. And I want to start this podcast by first thanking all the bold family for standing for Sarah from her sickness and now to the point she was given a send-off. I had thought of eulogizing Sarah here, but yes, our 15 years relationship, I knew Sarah when we were back in high school. But fate would have its way. Our 15 years friendship ended yesterday after we buried her, but the son has remained. She's not there, but the son has remained. So thank you for those who are still willing and able, including us, who will hang around the child as we look into the welfare of the child. Thank you for the bold for doing that. It was never about me. It was never about this podcast. It was about what God had planned. We did our best to support her, but God rested her. Back to politics. I am not understanding why government are so much interested and they are pursuing a narrative about who is financing Azimio la Umoja protests. And I don't get it how profiling Uhuru Kenyatta as a key financer of Azimio la Umoja protests is going to help bring the protest to an end. While we all agree, and they are saying that the protests are actually putting this economy in the standstill. While they blame that protests are actually killing the economy, they are busy insinuating the fact that a statement that Uhuru Kenyatta is financing protests. This narrative is not new. It is the one narrative that has often been used whenever these protests are done. And I am just saying that it's an escapist, it's been an escapist route. It is an escape route from the reality. Because I want to ask that question again. I've always asked. So, are people coming out to protest because Uhuru Kenyatta is financing it? You know, what is the real gist, the real reason why people are protesting? Irrespective of who is the financer, if indeed it is being financed, are they coming out because of Uhuru Kenyatta? Or are they coming out because of the real issues? I have always said this. Government, William Ruto has access to intelligence. He has the access to all the bank accounts of former president in this country. He has, anything that is needed to apprehend Uhuru Kenyatta, or rather to pinpoint Uhuru Kenyatta on the protests. But why is it that he has always opted to call Uhuru Kenyatta's name directly and blame Uhuru Kenyatta on what was happening without even producing a single evidence? If there is a bank account that Uhuru has and there is some transaction, there is some illicit transaction that can clearly show the public of money from an account that went to person X and the trail of that money. If there are protesters that have been paid, or let's make it clear, if there is a transaction between Uhuru Kenyatta and Azimio la Umoja members, Uhuru Kenyatta is protected by security men who are paid by taxpayers' money. Uhuru Kenyatta has intelligence surveillance around her, people or the men and women who are paid by our taxes. So if William Ruto is to man-mark the president and just to find out what the president is doing or how the president is supporting these protests, we can actually know that in the next, it just needs a phone call away for the president to come out and show. And so another question, if the government was to give us an evidence that Uhuru is supporting the protests, will that end the protests? And what I'm saying, in either way, the only route for William Ruto and the team to project themselves as people who are caring and are interested in bringing the protest to an end is to face it in reality, not to escape about it. Kithure Kindiki is saying that retired presidents or retired leaders are fueling or rather are supporting it. That came a day after Kipchumba Murkomen also made the same statement. The two leaders are members of the cabinet. And so I tend to understand, or I tend to believe, that if they are speaking, they're speaking from a point of convergence. Their point of convergence is the cabinet. And so anything they are saying is a position of the government. In such a big crisis, like weekly protests, that is actually, that can ground the economy, that is affecting the economy, how would government take such a very weak position or just take a propaganda position instead of saying what it is? The truth of the matter here is, whether it is a tree, it is Uhuru Kenyatta, or it is anyone sponsoring the protests, whether Azimio leaders are sponsored or they are given some money to do the protests, the bottom line here is this: the public is angry. We've seen people coming out to protest. What is this access? Who is paying that person to leave his house to go and protest? And if you can be paid to go and protest, does it mean you don't have another job? Why don't you face the reality? And in this podcast, I want to answer this question clearly. Why Uhuru is becoming the point of focus? Why government is doing this? There are only three reasons. And the first thing here is, it is a protest is being put to be about individuals. The people in government want to persuade that the protest is about Uhuru Kenyatta. And I want to say this: if it is about Uhuru Kenyatta, do you think that narrative can outweigh the real fact that the cost of living is high? Can it outweigh that? Now, if Raila calls a protest and Ruto says that protest has been paid, sponsored by Uhuru Kenyatta, now would that fact stop the good Kenyans from protesting? I just want us to think along that line. And that is why I said that people in government, or rather government, is taking a very weak, uninformed and propaganda position. That position is nothing short of a propaganda. It's because they've known very well the young people that are coming out protests are actually jobless. So one of the problems is joblessness. They're jobless. Number two, the few that have some daily coins are finding it difficult to meet their needs because of the inflation. So you need to address this question. I've always said we need to address it logistically. If by mere saying it is about Uhuru Kenyatta, if someone thinks it's going to reduce the pressure, then that person is lying to himself. I don't think. The second reason is William Ruto is avoiding a Raila confrontation. In fact, he's just trying to hide behind Uhuru. He is hiding and is just avoiding Raila because in public, Raila Odinga has become the face of rebellion. And he knows very well that Raila has been doing rebellion for quite aggression, the point of political aggression. Now, Raila, on political aggression, he easily cuts across the regional lines, the tribal lines, and the party lines. You will, and that is why, there are many people that will hate Raila because Raila is a presidential candidate. But immediately if that election is done, they're the ones that are saying that, look here, Raila Odinga should fight for us. And even those who voted for William Ruto from Mount Kenya and from the Rift Valley are saying Raila should fight for us. They know very well that Uhuru Kenyatta is not the face of aggression. And it is a ploy to fight emotions here. Avoid Raila confrontation. When you bring Uhuru in the fold, they want Kenyans to have that hate against Uhuru Kenyatta, because Uhuru Kenyatta being a retired president, someone will start wondering in the village, Uko Chini, in the Mount Kenya and the villages, that look here, why would a retired president fight Uhuru Kenyatta? So it is a narrative to play with people's emotions. Lastly, the reason why UDA team are actually speaking about Uhuru Kenyatta is because they know very well that masses are swinging towards Raila Odinga because of the protest. And not because of the protest, because of the political aggression is actually awakening people that, look here, things are bad. You know, it is reality that things are bad. But people have just been fearing to face that reality. So that political aggression, people want to say that when you're supporting Raila, it's like you're going sliding back to Uhuru era. You know, the things that Uhuru did not leave the country in such a good shape, and not by his making. Some were because of the global aspects, like the COVID-19. Then there was the Russian-Ukraine war that affected disruption of some supply of some basic goods, like the grain. So Uhuru, by coincidence, he left the country at a point the world was in a crisis. So William Ruto knows very well that when I say people are heading back to Uhuru because Uhuru is sponsoring, then people might not listen to it. But I think it's a misplaced statement, because the reality here is, it is not who is paying or who is supporting. It is the point of, are people rightly protesting? What exactly is causing the protest? Thank you.